Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm Leslie with the New Mexico Small Business Development Center, and I'm very proud to introduce Vic Burnaclaw. He's going to be presenting the webinar today on planning for a successful business. Great information if you're just starting out, or even if you just want to refresh and get going again. I'm excited to hear the information that he has. I want to remind everyone to type your questions into the Q&A because he's going to pick them up and we're going to answer them throughout the entire webinar. So don't be shy about if you have a question, just go ahead and type it in and we can stop on any of the information. The page that you're looking at right now is COVID-19 business resources. This will come in the handout that you'll get following today's webinar. So we'll have all these links for you that's available for you. Also, again, Vic Burnaclaw is a SCORE certified mentor. He's going to be presenting the information. If you set your Zoom ratio to fit Windows, sometimes it comes out a little better. Told you about the Q&A. If you want to write down questions and slide numbers, feel free. We have a lot of webinars that are at no cost for you. Visit our website where you found this one and take a look at our upcoming calendar. There's more that's added all the time. We also have the no-cost business counseling available for you at any time phase of your business. So we want to remind you that that is available. Did I get through everything, Vic? I'm not sure.
I think you did good.
Okay.
Great.
Then I will turn it over to Vic Burnaclaw.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. What we want to talk about today is planning for a successful business. There's always ways of jumping into a business. But if you decided to go on a vacation with your family, say to Disneyland, or you decided, hey, I'm going to take off and go to Las Vegas, would you just jump in the car and start going? Or would you start planning and setting up details of where I'm going to stay and how much money am I going to have and what should we be doing? Well, the same applies to a business. And you could have a wonderful business idea, but if you don't know how to implement that business idea, that is planning and implementation, then you're really not going to go very far. My name is Vic Burnaclaw. I want to let you know that I've been in business for many, many years, started a couple of businesses with my wife and son. We got them up to about 30 employees and a couple million in annual sales. Turn them over to our son, who's doing very, very well in the business and is one of the most challenging, one of the most stimulating, one of the most worrisome things I've ever done in my life. But it's also one of the most satisfying things I've ever done in my life. So I think if you have or plan to start a business, you're in for the same treat. What we need to do is put planning into the proper context of a startup. You can go ahead and write a business plan, and I think you probably all are aware of some aspects of a business plan. It's a fairly thick, detailed analysis of your business. And very frankly, we many years ago used to recommend that people with an idea write a business plan, this very thing, and go get some funding and open your doors. The problem was that led to just lots and lots of bankruptcies. So we're trying to do an entirely different arrangement. And this arrangement that they're planning, I'm going to talk about, started initially in Silicon Valley with high-tech firms. And it is spread over the years to its applicability to any type of business that wants to plan for a business. I personally was a poster child in a sense with planning. I started many, many years ago doing my planning, doing a lot of research and deciding that, hey, I should get into business, but I just didn't quite want to make the dive. I had an excuse that said, hey, I got a full-time job, but it turns out that the thing that pushed us was our son was laid off from a business that he was working in after he got out of high school and college. And he said, well, I told him, I said, hey, you can find another job and you can get a paycheck every week, or we can start a business and you can possibly make a lot of money, or you possibly don't get any pay. So he was living at home at the time, so it worked out pretty well. And we got the business started, and that was 40 years ago. So it's been very successful in the process. The business, the approach that we want to take is to build a business by planning and then implementing the business. So there's two aspects. How do we lay it out? And how do we actually implement it? How do we make it happen? So today we're going to talk about the planning aspect. How do we lay this thing out? And then next Thursday, we're going to be talking about actually implementing that plan with all of the detailed aspects. And there's a myriad of administrative aspects that you may or may not have worried about that range all over the map. And we're going to be treating those next week. So make sure you show up next week and we'll treat that second element of the whole effort. These alternatives that I talked a little bit about was you can have the formal business plan, which was a fairly lengthy, but it's quickly out of date. And it takes a lot of time to write it up. And it's fairly detailed, but it really needs to be thought out first before you actually start writing. So it's not really a help in the planning process. It's when you're done with your planning. And you may have to write a business plan for your bank because of some funding arrangement or with some other funding organization, no problem. But we're going to talk about a mechanism that allows you to do that from something called a lean business canvas. What is a lean business canvas? Turns out that it's a one-page working business plan. It's got 13 blocks. Now, the business model canvas originated many, many years ago. And at that time, it had like about 9 blocks. And people over the years have kind of modified their own. We in SCORE locally have taken one of the later ones and added a couple of blocks that we thought needed to be added to add the emphasis in that area. So we're going to be talking about those 13 blocks and what it takes to set up a business. Okay, it's an aid and as you're setting it up. So this is an instrument that you'll use from the very basic idea to, okay, now what do I do now? Okay, and you just keep modifying and modifying and modifying as you're going along. So it's a dynamic or changeable kind of thing. And so you update it as you go along. Here's what it looks like. And you say, oh my gosh, that looks terrible, complicated. Upper left-hand corner is problem and then solution. And we're going to walk through each one of these blocks as we're going through the whole process. In this canvas, one of the ways you can do it, you can either write it, make yourself a copy and just write in there, or you can use Post-its and just keep changing out the Post-its. I've even seen where people will take this and project it up on a whiteboard and then just write it right on the whiteboard and just keep changing the whiteboard as they go along too. So there's a lot of different ways. So the process is just a tool. And that's all we're going to talk about is this tool. How you use it is up to you, and how you adapt it is up to you. But we're going to familiarize you with that tool for your consideration in your planning process. The first step was a problem. The people have an idea of a business. They say, well, I'm going to start a business in X. Well, it turns out that X is not really the relevant thing. The relevant thing is, what is the problem in the mind of the customer? Not your problem, the mind of the customer. Why the customer? Turns out that the customer is the one that's going to be paying you, and therefore you have to solve their problems. And the bigger the problem, the bigger the potential. You have to learn from the customer what they need. So never assume that you know what the customer wants, because I've talked to people who say, well, hey, I know my customer needs X. And I said, well, have you verified that with the customer? Well, hey, in fact, there was one group, I've been a mentor at a high-tech area called ABQID. And we had one lady who, she was a professional psychologist, in fact. And she said, well, they would be stupid if they didn't take this. It'd be dumb. I said, well, how do you know that they may not be? Well, hey, they have to. Well, anyhow, she would not listen. She went into business and, of course, went out of business very quickly because the customers were saying, that's not a problem that I'm concerned with. But she thought it was. So never, never, never assume that you know what your customers want. The only way you're going to find out is if you totally understand the problem, and you have to get that problem definition from the customers. So go out and talk to them in terms of what is the biggest problem you're having in this particular area. And if I could come up with a solution, would you pay for it? And if you get enough of these people lined up, says, hey, that sounds pretty darn good, you're on your way. I mean, that's the equivalent risk-wise of a bird's nest on the ground. There's no way you're going to fall out and hurt yourself. You've already got the business lined up and you're on your way to success. Problem is that problem that the customer has is going to evolve. When we were in business, we started out with taking care of people's security problems of an electronic nature. And we quickly found out that, wait a minute, they need to have the new homes pre-wired. It was a whole different area for us. I'll talk about it later on, but we found out, wait a minute, we were selling stuff and they said, no, I got to lease it. Then they said, no, I got to have some portable things as well as the permanent. So our business evolved as the problems in the mind of the customer evolved. So make sure you stay close to your customer and understand what that problem is. So the first block is the most important block of the 13 blocks. I'm going to talk about another important one at the very end, but this one, you have to understand what's the problem. And if you understand the problem in the customer's mind and you can solve that problem, and the more the customer is jumping up and down and saying this problem is bugging the crap out of me, then you're going to, and you can solve it, man, you got a really successful business because they're going to demand that you solve that problem. But you have to come up with a solution. And as I mentioned, that solution is called lean entrepreneurship from the Silicon Valley days, but it's no more than finding out what your customers want. It has to be accepted by them because they may say, yeah, that sounds pretty good. First thing you want to do is, great, give me a check. I can't give you a check. Give me a purchase order. No, give me a letter of intent. Anything that you get a commitment out of them, then you're on your way. If they all say, well, that really sounds pretty good, why don't you get in business? You come back to them and say, well, I changed my mind. Get the commitment if at all possible. It can be modified in time, as I mentioned. The third block was, who is the customer? Well, I've had a lot of people just say, hey, customer is everybody. I said, well, if the customer is everybody, then you must have an infinite amount of money to go market to everybody. He said, oh, no, I don't have that. Well, I said, then fine. Then find out who is in the customer segment you want. I mean, is this a product that would be applicable to young people, to old people, to males, females, entrepreneurs? It'd be applicable to people who are outdoorsy or indoorsy. Who is that customer segment that you want to take after? And when you clearly define it, then you know where you're going to focus on that. The way to do that is to think about, who is my ideal customer? My ideal customer is the following description. Great, perfect. And the next question is, where does that ideal type of customer hang out? How can I reach that ideal customer? Do I reach that ideal customer through an association, through some sort of a particular magazine that they all look at? Or are they all hanging out at a particular location that I could go and advertise it? Focus your energies, and it's much better on a marketing viewpoint to use a rifle than to use a shotgun. Shotgun is pretty broad and may catch a lot of areas, but it may not catch the area that you're really interested in, or with enough density, in a sense, to really make a difference. So if you can identify the ideal customer, you know where they hang out, that becomes the major part of your marketing plan. So there's your marketing plan. Build it for your ideal customer and focus, but be prepared as you're going along to broaden that. That says that, wait a minute, I'll give you a quick illustration. When we started in business, we provided security systems for homes. And they said, wonderful, now come down to my business and do my business. Well, that was an entirely different orientation for us because it required a different set of thinking and a different set of needs. So we had to adjust to satisfy that customer. So your marketing plan is going to evolve as well. The next block is, what is the product or service? Are you going to build something? Are you going to buy something for resale? Are you going to provide a service? So are you going to make it? Or are you going to buy it? From a product viewpoint. If it's a service, where are you going to provide that service? Are you going to provide it at your location? At their location? You have to have some training to provide that service. You need some vehicles or special equipment to provide that service. Is there specific requirements from a credibility, that is a certification viewpoint? You have to get a license, and we're going to talk about that next week in terms of licensing, along with a lot of other things. But think about all the details of that product and service and what that entails. Something kind of a fancy term called unique value proposition. It's really not all that fancy when you break it down into what is valuable to the customer. Always, always, always thinking, what does the customer value? What does the customer want? What does the customer need? What does the customer demand? What problem do they have that we can fix? And if you have the capability of providing that solution, particularly if your solution is possibly unique, that is to you, that you can provide. And that uniqueness could be, hey, I'm in a particular part of town. I do present it or provide it under certain conditions. I'm available outside of working hours. Or wait a minute, I have a special tool or equipment or special capability. If it's unique, it's even more valuable to you. So if you can do that, you can, as I mentioned, offer it with that no one else has. It's the unique aspect of it. But in addition, if you can provide that uniqueness, it will keep you away from your competitors. It'll take a while for the competitors to catch up with you. And all you want to do is always just stay ahead of the competitors, and you got it made. What am I doing that is unique, but particularly from a value perspective in the minds of the customers? If I have that, then I have something called a competitive advantage. And that is, what does it allow me to win over my competition? Because if you're a startup or we're in a newer type of business, why in the world would a customer come to you? I mean, if you've got competitors, they say, hey, these other people are proven solutions. I'll just go to them. I know they know what they're doing, because otherwise they wouldn't be in business. You're just starting. You may not know what you're doing. So you have to have something that provides that competitive advantage. Maybe you provide a better service, higher quality, better price, but you got to watch the price, because we're going to be talking about pricing and we're going to talk about financing. And if the money isn't there, you're going to go out of business. So be careful about cutting your prices. When we were in business, we were never the lowest price, but we offered a product and service that was a higher quality. And we said, hey, it warrants the additional, because you can generate the trust in us because of consistency. So everybody has a competitive advantage. How can you protect that from your competitors? There's all sorts of things such as patents, trademarks, and things of that sort. But everything I've read, most of the people in the financial world say, don't worry so much about protecting as much as staying ahead. If you can keep coming up with new ideas, new approaches, and better service and better products for your customers, they're going to stick with you, because you have earned their trust, and they're not going to run out and take a chance on somebody that they're not sure of when they're sure of you. On the other hand, if you shortcut your customers, you don't provide the service, they're certainly going to be looking for alternatives. So it's up to you in terms of how you keep those, but try to stay ahead of your competitors, and then that way you don't have to compete with them on price. Another block is marketing and sales, which we've talked a little bit about. Question is, how can I reach my customers? Can I do that face-to-face? A lot of the initial questions to people is going to be on a face-to-face, understand their problem. But we did an awful lot of face-to-face in terms of knocking on doors, talking to people, who do you know? And with each customer that was satisfied, who do you know that might have a similar problem? We go talk to them, say, hey, your friend X, was very satisfied. People will believe their friends. They're not going to believe you because you're an unknown. So face-to-face is better than just plain old advertising, but advertising is there. But the strongest part of advertising, there's a lot of forms of advertising, whether it's social media, print, radio, TV, etc. The strongest one is word of mouth. And if you can get that word of mouth back to other customers, they will trust that person they're getting that information from more, as I said, than others. Then the next thing is, how do I close the sale? It's great to market. It's great to advertise. It's great to push. But unless you get that signature on the bottom line, that contract, that sale, nothing happens. And when I was in business, I told our people, everything starts with a sale. If I have a sale, then we can do the operations, we can do the billing, we can do the servicing and everything like that. But you have to have a sale. And part of marketing in that back end is sales. And obviously there are some seminars from NMSBDC here that are on sales as well. And you can learn a lot by doing that, attending that is. There are key resources. It's a block and you say, well, sure, I know there's a lot of key resources. But the most important one, believe it or not, is not money. It's not product. It's not service. It's time. The reason is you can always get more money. You can always get more product, but you can't get more time. So how you use your time is critical. So think about how you use your time. And part of that process is, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later today and then some next week, is how do I set up my time so I get the maximum benefit from its application? Instead of just paying attention to all of the little things here and there, I pay attention to the things that really make a difference. Obviously, the financial resources is a major resource. We're going to talk about cash availability later on when we get to funding. But cash availability is absolutely critical in your business. You don't want to start a business unless you've got cash in hand or can reach the cash very quickly to satisfy your needs. Because I've seen where people will start a business with wonderful hopes, wonderful aspirations, and get partway down that track and run out of cash, and it all dries up and blows away, and they've lost their investment. If you have to have brick and mortar for a storefront or things like that, there's a whole bunch of aspects surrounding that that could be everywhere from where do I do it? How do I do it? Who's responsible for build out? How am I going to set up where's the best place for it? So if you get to that point, make sure you talk to your counselor or to your mentor in terms of your thinking in that area, because there's many, many aspects to that. And do I have to have employees? Most people start up, just with themselves as we did. But we weren't in business but a fairly short period of time. We had to go get our first employee. Getting employees is another whole world because you have the process of recruiting, training, developing, retaining, pay, taxes, all of those things, benefits, huge amount of stuff. Be sure you talk to your counselor or mentor in terms of employees, because that's another whole area, much more than what we could cover today, but it's a very, very important area. Don't skip on it. Vendors. Well, people say, hey, I just go out and just buy whatever I need, no problem. The problem with that is that some of the times the vendors pull up lame. Specifically, you may have a perfect vendor, is great, but all of a sudden they go out of business, or they've got so much business they put you at the back of the order list. What we had to, when we first started business, we were tied in with one company that had superior product, wonderful people, etc. But we were smart enough to already generate alternatives right from the very start. And in time, that first initial vendor, who was fantastic, went out of business. But at that point, we didn't drop a stitch because we had alternatives available, and we just jumped into the other vendors who we had established relationships with. With those vendors, you may have to have contracts. Be sure you take a look at contracts. If you're not sure of contracts, be sure you talk to your counselor or mentor on that. The big thing with key resources that has helped to you is the good people at SBDC, SCORE, and we're going to be talking about some others as well, are all available to help you. So you're not out there alone. You can get help in terms of, hey, what about this? Because most of us have been there, done that, and we've gone through the potholes of business. I've worn out my knees in front of bankers. So it's a process of getting help from people who have been there, done that. Risks. There are all sorts of risks, but rather than try to cover all of them, let me cover it the easiest way, and that is to say, what is the worst and the best situation? The worst, I think you could understand. Hey, the worst could be my major client decided to drop me and go to somebody else. We had that problem. We had a major client that went bankrupt. and all this, and left us with a lot of bills that they hadn't paid. So what you want to do at this worst is think it through. What is the worst possible thing that could happen? And then generate a plan, which we'll talk about in a minute. But then you could say, well, why would I want to worry about the best situation? Let me give you a quick little story. A friend of mine who worked for a firm in Arizona was this fantastic individual. He had ideas galore. And it was a successful running company. And he says, hey, I got this idea. What about this? They said, wonderful, we'll invest in that. And it was a good idea. Next time, oh, hey, I got another idea and another idea and another idea. And they kept investing to the point where they had so much invested, they didn't have the cash flow and they went out of business, being very, very successful. You could also have the same kind of situation in your business if all of a sudden your efforts, your service, your product was so good that all of a sudden the sky opened up and all these people are standing in front of your door saying, gimme, gimme, gimme. Well, if you have any kind of a situation that says, here it is, and I'm going to bill you for it, you're waiting for them to pay it. In the meantime, the vendor and your employees saying, hey, pay me now. So you got to have very deep pockets with cash in order to take care of major growth. So a best situation like that story I told you could result in your going bankrupt, which is hard to believe, but it could happen. So think about it. And what would you do if that happened? Because if all of a sudden they all line up in front of your door, no problem. I've already got up an alternative funding sense. I got arrangements where I could open up a second shop, or I can get a couple more people or whatever it is. But think about that as well as for both the worst and the best from a risk situation. Have a written plan. You say, well, I've got it in my mind. I've asked people, I said, fine, tell me what that is. And they start telling me, well, what about this? Well, I didn't think about that. I said, if you write it down, there's a higher probability you're going to be thinking through each of the aspects of that. And they say, oh, my gosh, I didn't think about it. Okay, let's write that down. So writing it down is very important. You can remediate.
Hold on, everyone, for just a minute. Let's see if we can get Vic back up again. He seems to have frozen for a second. I'm going to give him just a second. There he is.
Back?
You had frozen for a minute, Vic, but you're back up again. So go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. But you can remediate your problem several ways. One I mentioned by redesigning. So I said if you had a dangerous situation, you could end up redesigning that so to be less dangerous. Or another alternative is to shift the risk to somebody else. One of the ways is subcontracting. So say, hey, I can't change this process and it's too risky for me, but I'm going to subcontract it and I'm going to pay them and then they're going to be responsible for taking care of that risk. The other way you can do it is through insurance. So he says, hey, this is a little bit of a risky situation. I don't want to subcontract it. I can't redesign it. So I'm going to buy the insurance to cover me in the event it happens. And we'll talk about that particularly next time, but insurance takes many, many forms, but you only want to buy the insurance that you can't afford the risk. If you can afford the risk, for example, if you've got an old car and you're paying a lot for property damage to your car, you may want to save the money and let that go, because if the car was damaged and say, hey, it was so damaged, so old, it doesn't make any difference anyhow. So buy insurance for those things that you really don't want to or can't afford to take the risk. Revenue and costs, all of the processes, all of the operations of a business, everything in it reduced to a funnel of money. Money in and money out. So basically there is revenue, that's sales, that's money coming in, and there's expenses, money going out. One of the ways you could think about this is almost like a barrel of liquid, and that liquid is called money. So to start the business, you're going to put some liquid money into the barrel so it has a particular level. And as more money comes in from revenue and sales, it raises the level in the barrel. But as you pay your bills, that lowers the level in the barrel. Well, if the barrel stays the same, you're at what's called break even. That is, the money coming in, money going out is even. But if the money, if the level is going up, that's called profits. That difference from where it was to where the new level is, it's profits. If the level drops, it's obviously losses. So always have to have liquid money in the barrel. Because if the barrel goes dry, you are out of business. Similarly, the body has blood in it. And if the body has enough blood, it stays alive. When the blood is gone, the body dies. Same way in your business, when the money is gone, your business dies. So you want to make sure that you talk about cash flow. There's another one of the SBDC seminars on cash flow. Very important on cash flow. Keep the cash positive if at all possible. In other words, when you start out a business, typically you end up with losses. We did, most people do. But try to get to a cash positive, or at least to get to break even as quickly as possible, and then go cash positive. With the cash positive, that is more money coming in than going out, it covers a tremendous number of sins. I mean, say, hey, I want to pay people more money. No, I want to get the bigger facility. No, I want to dress this place up. No, I got to get new product. Wonderful. As long as you're cash positive, you've got a lot of flexibility. If you're cash negative, you're hurting. One of the ways of keeping track of this is something called an income statement, or what's called a P&L, or profit and loss. They mean the same thing. Income statement is no more than coming in, going out, and what's left. Here's a simple example. This example just covers, remember, income statement always covers a period of time, whether it's a year, a month, a quarter, whatever. But up at the top, it'll tell you what the period of time. This is an old one from like 2018, but the simple one that just shows what's coming in, revenues, what's going out, expenses, and how much is left over. And so we'll be talking about next week about how to set this up so that you can get the most information out of it. But you're always trying to come down here and have a positive, that is a profit. The 13th block is one of the most important blocks, and not enough people really pay attention to this. The big question is, what do you really want out of your business? Do you really want to say, hey, I want just a job? Or no, I want to make $1 million? Or no, I want this set up so that I can bring my family in or have the kids take over the business? No, I'm really here to really generate jobs for the local area because I want to help the locality, the local area economically. No, I want to get myself a reputation as being a success. Whatever it is, it doesn't make any difference, whatever it is. Think about what it is you really want out of your business. Then the question is, how do we keep score? Well, the way we keep score is by taking a look at that and asking myself periodically, am I moving in the direction I want? There's a whole series of books called E-Myth by Michael Gerber. E-MYTH, E-Myth. And the whole stress of his whole set of books is one thing, and that is that most business people spend all their time working in the business. That is, they're turning the crank all the time, all the issues and trying to keep their head up above water and keep afloat cash-wise, etc. They never take time to stand back. And his stress is take some time not only to work in the business, as everybody does, but to work on the business. In other words, stand back. So we recommend is consider like maybe an hour a month or an hour a week or whatever you decide to do to stand back and say, I know where I wanted to go. Am I going in that direction? And if I'm not, what do I need to do to get myself back on track? And that way you have this constant set of goal arrangements in front of you, and you know whether you're moving toward attaining it or not. And whenever you do, make sure you celebrate that event. Keep as I mentioned, the incremental measures of that. How am I going to decide? But the key in all of this, the key of the whole works, and as I mentioned before, I was one that was probably one of the worst in terms of not putting it into action right away. I planned and finally had to. So then we put it into effect and it became very successful. Still in business now, roughly 40 years later. And lots of people have jobs as a result of that action. But you have to put the plan into action. And we're going to be talking about that next week in terms of how do I implement this plan? How do I get it moving? Open to questions. So Leslie, if you've got any questions that anybody has, please let me know and we'll jump on those. But while you're generating the question, did I freeze up again? Leslie?
No, you're still, no, you're still going.
Okay, I just want to make
Yep.
sure. Okay, while you're thinking about the questions, let me pass on to you. There are resource partners that can help you in this whole process. Besides the SBDC and SCORE, there is a Women's Business Center program, just a wonderful program, and it's not just for women now, it's for men as well. And they have an incubator over there, training, counseling, etc. So that's a super program, as well as the Veterans Business Outreach Center. If you're a veteran, make sure you get a hold of Rich Koffel. Tremendous program. They do tremendous training, and they have a lot of programs that can help you there. So the bottom line of all of that is there's a lot of people that are available to help you. So don't pass up that opportunity. Any questions, Leslie?
So we don't have any questions coming in. I do want to remind everyone of that. So what Vic's talking about today is the business plan. The next part of the series, and you do have to sign up separately for that, is implementing the plan. So once, and I think we did show, I know you had a lot, yep. So what happens is once you develop the plan, you can always come back to the next part of the two-part series, implementing the plan, and then we can go back and kind of tweak the plan and answer the questions that you have. I do want to remind everyone that the part 2 will be coming up next week at the same time. We also have a bilingual session coming up on accessing financial resources. A phone app, is it right for your business? They were really popular, but is it good for you? We have getting found on Google, always another segment that's really popular, and it kind of ties in with your planning and everything. We have Eddie coming up on 3 steps to attracting and retaining customers. So there's all kinds of webinars that kind of tie in with everything. So just want to remind everyone on that. And there's no questions. So Vic, do we finished quickly today? Do you have any last thoughts?
Went just a little bit faster, but make sure that if this went too fast for you, you can, this session will be repeated in 3 weeks. So you can get back on and just re-listen to it again if that is of any help. But in the meantime, next week, we'll take this very same plan and we're going to be talking about how do we put it into practice with all of the other things that have to be done to get a business off the ground. So be sure you come back and catch that. But then again, if you say this was too fast, come back in 3 weeks and you can repeat the whole process over again and see if it registers. Because I've done that. I've read books 2 and 3 times, and each time I'll read it, I'll get a lot more out of it than I did the first time around. So that's perfectly acceptable. The big thing is, what does it take to make your business successful? That's the big thing. And that's what we're all here to help you achieve. So thank you for your participation, and look forward to you next time.
One question. Let me take a look at the question. Oh, we have a thank you. Oh, thanks, Vic. All right. We will see everybody next time. You guys have a great rest of your week. We have another thank you. It was informative and resourceful. So again, thank you, Vic. Good. And make sure you hit the second part of the 2-part series and bring any questions that you might have. So
exactly. Good.
Bye, guys.